great. I got that on picture.
This computer, I realized that's like, 16 gigs.
Are you doing video?
No.
No, it's okay if you are. I'm just wondering. Maybe I can dance or something.
This is still
animated. Oh, the history of Furry is. Hello, everybody. My name is Peter Van Heel. I'm also known as Piet within the furry fandom. And I have absolutely no notes. Didn't actually print them off, but I have a. Oh, thank you. I need caffeine.
Yes, we have a supply of that.
But I'm a bit of an amateur fandom historian for like science fiction fandom and the history of role-playing game fandom. And I've also done a little bit of work researching the history of furry. Of course, nowadays this is all like on WikiFur now. So if you want to know any of this stuff, you get more specific dates. Just go to WikiFur and furry history. But
could have saved yourself $35.
This is true, yeah. Exactly. Once upon a time, you had to like scrounge around on like Furry Muck and talk to like gray muzzles who've been there for 20 years. And so forth. So at any rate, I was going to start off by talking about, well, first of all, I'll mention the fact that we're not going to be talking about anthropomorphic characters in history so much as the history of the actual fandom. And I actually did a poll. Now, how long have you, who's been in the fandom for more than 10 years? Anyone here? Anyone? Anyone? Me? Anyone? Less than 10 years, everybody? All right, okay, so like 5 years or so? Yeah. Now, here's another little poll. Where did you find out about the fandom?
We have known about the fandom for more than 10 years.
You've known about it, but not been involved with it. Okay. And where did you hear about it first?
Through university, when I was in university.
Okay, was that like...
Friends were furries.
Early 90s, or I'm sorry, I can't quite see it, so I'm guessing at your age. Maybe
Well, my first of my 4 degrees was in the late 80s.
Okay, right on. So that is about when fandom started growing. Was in the with the rise of like the internet and whatnot in the 90s. But so I'm guessing most of you are under 5 years. So I'm guessing you probably heard about it on the internet.
I heard about it on television.
On television. What television? What did you hear about it? Is that on Discovery Channel or something?
No, TLC.
Oh, yes, TLC does special ones. They talk to
Animal Imitator.
Yes, I talked to a couple of furries.
I think August 2004.
Yeah, so there you got a specific date. I first heard about it myself. There was a show called Prisoners of Gravity with Rick Green. So it was on from 88 to 91, I think. It was rebroadcast later. One of his early episodes, they were talking about Omaha the Cat Dancer, they were talking about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, sort of funny animal fandom. And that's when I had been aware of the existence of this media before, but I was not aware that there was an organized fandom or a name for it. And then so that time I started seeking it out, and was aware of the existence of Furry around 92, sort of stuff. It was like Albedo comics and so on. Right, well, I'm going to start by saying that certainly anthropomorphic characters have existed throughout history in media and in even in religion and spirituality. The second oldest piece of representative art ever found, it's called it's a lion man. It's found in Germany. It's just very gracile, very well done. It's not crude or crude at all. Carving of a man with the head of a lion, or possibly the woman with the head of a lion. It's sort of unclear because it's kind of worn out of it. But it's carved from a mammoth tusk, and that's how old it is. That is 32,000 years, which is like I think 27,000 years before the pyramids were built. So the entirety of written history times 15, sort of thing. That's how old
older than the pyramids.
Much older than the pyramids. It's basically as old as human self-awareness, in a sense. But what we're going to talk about today, though, is the history of the actual fandom, which is a lot shorter.
The modern fandom.
The modern fandom, yeah. I think it starts, in the 19th century when you had cartoonists who were like doing anthropomorphized characters, and that became a sort of recognized subset of cartooning, art, comics, and so forth. And then you had like Beatrix Potter and that sort of thing. And Beatrix Potter, Winnie the Willows, the rabbits and waistcoats genre of anthropomorphic fiction. But even then, and then in the 1960s, you started to get there was always a sort of a undercurrent of adult themes as well. Usually there's like really poorly done pornography here and there. And then you get later on you get stuff like Fritz the Cat. But it wasn't until the late 1970s that funny animal fandom appeared. It wasn't furry yet. But this, it first showed up and was first expressed in Amateur Press Association magazines, apples. Now, who does not know what an apple is? Who knows what an apple is? So okay. So I'll run over a bit. Apples are, they're usually put out on a regular basis by fans, and they're photocopied. Earlier years, they were like hexagraphed. And they're distributed on a mailing list, and it's sort of a cooperative thing. It's almost, you can almost think of it as like an internet forum in slow motion. And this was very important in the rise of science fiction fandom as well, in the 20s and 30s and that sort of thing. People would get on these mailing lists, and what would happen is you'd write a letter, and you'd send it to a central address, and all the letters from people, all the letters are stories or pieces of art, would be all collected by one or two people, be collated, and then they would make copies of that and mail that to the mailing list. And some of these things for science fiction got really, really big. And as I said, they were almost like internet forums where people had handles. They used like lead speak and stuff like this. The 1920s, 30s version of it. It was kind of dependent on the vagaries of the typewriter. There was a guy called the F-less L, because the letter F on his keyboard was broken, so he always typed EPH or FH rather than the anyway. Sort of beside the point, but people would they'd fall in love through fanzines and like travel across the country to meet each other. And they would try and start science fiction communes and stuff like that, just like furries do nowadays. Then it would fall apart because they discovered nobody had a job and nobody would do the dishes. People like pretended to commit, they would have like drama and they would pretend to commit suicide in these EPAs. But in 1975, again, I don't know my notes, so I'm not doing a specific date. I think it was 1975 or 76. There was an APA called Booty, and that was specifically dedicated to funny animal fandom, which at that point was just a subset of science fiction fandom. So if you look at the front covers of these things, they'll have like pictures of Commander Spock as like, a monkey sitting at a table with like Captain Curtis and an ocelot sort of thing. And they were just telling stories more about aliens, as aliens with animal characteristics and what their world would be like. Actually, it was a Toronto native, Terrell Wayne, who's a very well-known artist and fan. Terrell Wayne, yes. In 1978, he wrote a letter to Voodoo asking why there wasn't more sex in funny animals. So it was a Canadian who invented furry porn, essentially. Or at least who first advanced the idea. And soon afterwards, and that letter inspired the publication of Omaha the Cat Dancer, which was a long-running and very well-respected comic book about basically in a world of inhabited by animal people. There was like an animal dancer in Omaha, and it was sort of like a soap opera story about about her life. And the author of that, I think, sadly died. That died 10 years ago, cancer. And that was very well respected. It won an Eisner Award. And through the early 80s, there was a rise of other comics. This is sort of like the analog age of furry fandom. And in the early 1980s, people thought, you know what, why are we a subset of science fiction or fantasy fandom? Because they had their own code words, they had their own culture. And it was at a room party in, I think, 1983, where Steve Galachi and Fred Patton and a few other, these people who are now like in their 60s, basically said, why don't we'll make our own thing? And the term furry was first coined. They know the specific date the term furry was used and where it was in a given room at like a room party at a science fiction convention. Sorry, what's up?
I said in the hotel problem long since demolished.
Yes, quite possible. Yeah.
I think it was demolished, actually.
Yeah, I think it was in Chicago at like DuckCon or something.
Oh.
But again, I didn't know my notes, but go to the wiki first. And it will tell you everything. That's where furry began in the analog form as a self-described, self-conscious fan, and not just a subset of. Well, I like Star Trek, but I also like drawing like Captain Curtis and Ocelot. So I guess I have fun. And so they were telling specific furry stories. And so you had comics like Albedo Anthropomorphics by Steve Galachi, and that was used by a lot of people to publish their art when they first got discovered. That's where Usagi Yojimbo started. And Usagi Yojimbo later became a supporting character in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Now, so there's a couple of new people come in. Have any of the new people that came in, have you been in furry longer than 10 years?
Yes.
How long have you been in furry for?
13, 14 now.
13, 14? It's